All right, we're live on Facebook. Hello, everybody out there. My name is Tim McMahon. I am a producer and host of programs Inside Toledo and 4-1 Nosh on Buckeye Community Arts Network here in Toledo, otherwise known as BCAN. Thank you for joining us tonight. We hope those of you that ordered dinner and a copy of the book delivered by the Blarney Irish Pub are enjoying your meals. If you're interested in joining us for future authors events, we have 3 ways in which you can do so. You can watch for free on the Toledo Library's Facebook page, which you're doing right now. You can purchase a copy of the book for pickup at your preferred branch after publication and watch the event through a secure Zoom link. Or if you are local, you can purchase the enhanced experience, which includes dinner from a local restaurant and a copy of the book delivered to your door. You can then watch the featured author through a secure Zoom link. Okay, so we have a very exciting author tonight who we're going to get to in just a bit. But first, some upcoming authors include Kyle Mills on Friday, September 25th, this Friday, Teresa Caputo on October 7th, Nikki Giovanni on October 22nd, Dr. Michael Roizen on October 26th, and you can find full event details by visiting toledolibrary.org/authors. Before we get going, I want to take a minute to thank our presenting sponsors, the Library Legacy Foundation, for their generous financial support. Gifts to the foundation allow the library to continue to offer great programs like this one right here, along with countless others. We're also incredibly grateful to the presenting media sponsors, The Blade and Buckeye Broadband, our supporting sponsor, Bureau Group, and our community sponsor, the Friends of the Library. This program is being recorded right now and will be uploaded to the library YouTube channel afterward. Staff will be monitoring the Facebook Live and the Zoom chat functions, so please, please, please send us your questions if you have them. And once again, thank you for joining us. Right now, I'm pleased to introduce our moderator for the evening, the Executive Director of the Toledo-Lucas County Public Library. It's Jason Kuchma. Jason, welcome.
Hi there. Thanks, Tim. Nice to see you.
Yeah, good to see you too.
Are we rolling into?
We're going. Yeah, the floor is yours. So if you want to get right into it.
Let's without further ado, let's jump right into it. Let's bring Ms. Manzano on screen here, and we'll get the conversation started.
Howdy.
Hello. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Good. I'm joining you from my office here in downtown Toledo. Where do we find you?
I'm in New York City.
Yes. In your home. Yes. Thank you for inviting us into your home. This is the first time we've had a chance to meet. I am Jason Kuchma, the Executive Director here for the Public Library. I'm also a man of a certain age who grew up watching Sesame Street, so I'm more than a little bit excited to talk with you tonight. And we'll certainly talk about that as well. But first, I want to spend we'll spend an hour or so chatting about whatever you want to talk about. But first and foremost, the book, A World Together. I will introduce this here. Folks may or may not have a copy at home if they ordered one in advance with their meal. But I have 6-year-old twins, and as soon as this book came into my house, my son and daughter snatched it up immediately and read it to each other back and forth. So she read it to him, and then he read it to her. They were immediately consumed by it. The pictures are incredible. Let's get into it. How did you decide to start this project?
Well, actually, it was National Geographic who approached me, and they asked me to write a book on diversity. And I jumped at the chance. As you know, our country is struggling with racial issues at a heightened tension I never could have imagined. And I remember that when I started on Sesame Street in 1969, it was the height of the civil rights movement. And we actually thought that we had made great strides in the understanding of getting people to understand, to help each other and to be more tolerant. Up until that time in 1969, there were no people of color on television, as a matter of fact. So it was a groundbreaking moment on Sesame Street that long ago. I thought that we would have made more strides towards tolerance. Sadly, we haven't. So what to do? There's nothing to do but go forward. So when National Geographic asked me to write this book about diversity, I thought, yes, of course, how could I say no?
Start to finish, how, so when National Geographic approaches you and says, let's do a book about diversity, there are so many places you can begin, and you don't know where that journey is going to take you. Talk through that process. When did it start, and when did the book finish, and those sort of things?
Sure, you have to find your own voice in it. Obviously, many people have written books on diversity. There is a lot of children's books based on diversity. One thing I've learned from Sesame Street is that just because you tackle some issues in one generation doesn't mean it spills into the next generation. So you can't say it enough times. So once I got over that problem, like people have said this, I tried to find my own voice in it. I have written picture books, which is, as you know, is illustrating, and books with prose, which are young adult novels. But I had never dealt with photographs. Now, photographs say a lot more than an illustration, and they're much more alive. They're like 3D. So I thought about what photographs meant to me, and I remember as a little kid being obsessed when I found photographs of my family in Puerto Rico. Now, this is because I'm 7 years old, the age of your children. I had never been to Puerto Rico. It was a place that my parents used to talk about. Sometimes they would say what a terrible place it was, how they had to leave terrible poverty to come to the mainland. And then other times they talk about what a wonderful place it was. So these conflicting stories really made me interested. I would pore over these old black and white photographs of them in Puerto Rico and start a lot of conversations with my mother, who would explain to me what was in the photos and what they meant. So ultimately, I think that's what I'm trying to get kids to get into with this, looking at all of these photographs. I hope that they start conversations. Now, the photographs came after the words. The words come first. And what I wanted to delineate was, and show children, is that basically we all have the same feelings. We're all part of the human condition. We all feel sorry, happy, upset, hungry. Now, we feel those things for different occasions. Some people like pizza, some people like caviar, but it's still basically being hungry for something. And I wanted to sort of connect the dots and point out how we all feel the same things in the human condition.
Photos do say a lot, and as you say, those photos of your mom and your sister were an inspiration. Can you talk to me a little bit about, or tell us a little bit about that first trip? And I was reading in your letter at the back of the book, your first trip to Puerto Rico as a child. You were growing up in the Bronx, and you took this first trip. What was that like?
It was stunning. First of all, I thought all of my religious upbringing bandied the word paradise around. And I got to Puerto Rico and I thought, what are they talking about? It's right here. Because I had never been to a Caribbean place. And the colors were so beautiful, the turquoise of the water, and the roosters singing, and the hibiscus, the red of the hibiscus was so vibrant, and the breeze was so warm and comforting. And I understood why my mother would paint the bathroom and the kitchen hot pink and turquoise, which I always kind of you know, kind of look my nose down on because it was in beige and spa beige. But when I saw where she had come from, I understood much more about her sensibility. I understood why we wanted to be outside a lot. So I feel that I really did get a chance to understand my my parents more the first time I went to Puerto Rico.
And I think that it's that familiarity, right? So you're demystifying something. You get to a place that you've only heard about, you've seen pictures, and I think that's one of the things that I think was so compelling, or is so compelling, about this book. When my kids picked it up, you're immediately transported to all these different parts of the world, and and as you said, those photos, those images say so much that you can read this book once and then read it again, and it almost
Right.
makes several different books every time you read it because you see something else different in those photos. Talk a little bit about, so you mentioned that the writing came first and then the images. So how is that process different, writing a book that the photos come after that versus, you know, working with an illustrator or working in prose?
You know, working with an illustrator is, it works the same way. My picture books, No Dogs Allowed, and A Box Full of Kittens, and Miracle on 133rd Street, the words came first, and then the illustrator took off. I'm always surprised at how the illustrator makes me see my story in a different way. You know, it's like, oh, wow, of course, that's absolutely right. Not how I saw it. But I felt that way on Sesame Street, too, when I wrote a script and the director would shoot it from different angles. I go, oh, of course, I didn't see that, you know, this way of telling a story. So the words always did come first. We had a wonderful editor, Marfe Delano, that helped me be as pithy as possible with the words, meaning you write a lot, and when you see the same information coming up, that tells you what it is that you want to say, and then you start polishing those concepts and saying it better, so that, you know, you have to be very brief in these books. And then Lori Epstein, who was the photography editor, brought in images that she thought were appropriate. Now, I was able to give my opinion on what images to be used. And of course, I wanted urban images to be included because that's where I'm from.
While you're talking about those collaborators that you worked with, I was struck to see that you mentioned you thanked one of your collaborators for her cultural insights, and I have to imagine that even, you know, you're writing a book, it's you have to be learning through this. And what I was reading into that comment was that there were some cultural insights you probably learned in the process of working on this book. Could you talk a little bit about that? Or is anything you can say right now?
I'm not sure what you mean.
Well, you asked for let's see, what's her name? And I wish that I hope that everybody has a copy of this at home. And I was talking to Kathy, who coordinates our authors talk this evening, and asking if we had any photos to share, because it almost feels like a disservice. I would rather have my picture, take my picture off of here and just put pictures from the book instead. But in the back, we talk about Ebony Gassine Wilkins for her cultural insights on all aspects of this book. And I thought maybe there was a little bit of a story behind that, but maybe not.
No, that's a good question, actually. Now I know what you mean. There was, I talked about, or I mentioned that once when we were doing Sesame Street, we went to a Native American reservation and did some shooting there. And I was so fascinated by the young women and their hairstyles that I would wear them myself. And another example was that when I was a kid, I loved East Indian culture. I just was fascinated by it. And somebody gave me a sari once, and I would wear it. in today's world, that would be considered cultural appropriation. And so I learned that, or I kind of knew it, but but it kind of brought it home and made it personal when I mentioned that in my afterwards, and somebody said, this could be taken in this particular way. So I was mindful of that.
Do you have any favorite photos in this book that you would point to? I mean, there's so many, and obviously. But,
yeah, there's a photo of a soldier bidding his child goodbye. It looks like he's an air, and you just see his face. You see that you don't see either face, but their bodies are crushed together. Let's see who finds it first, you or me. Me.
You found
this one.
There we go. Oh, it's so good.
And I wrote first I wrote this, and she found, and when people feel scared, they sometimes forget that deep down we're all the same. And I was interested in saying that because I'm stunned by all the anger that's out there and the rage that's out there. Maybe wearing a mask might cause really, really huge annoyance, but the rage that I feel connected with that makes me think there's something else that's bothering people, and I can only attribute it to being scared about something. And I want to somehow touch on that and say that people might act that way because they're scared, and then in those moments of fear, we forget that we're the same, that we like to do this too.
Yes.
I
think one of the most amazing things about the book is how it illustrates, as you said, the commonalities we have across so many different cultures. And let's talk a little bit. Let's get into, some of the things we were talking about. This is a very polarizing time right now. And we know that there's a tremendous amount of fear. There are individuals who are stoking fear. There are individuals who are afraid, and for a variety of reasons, justified or unjustified. And how do we, working with our kids, obviously, is one of our ways that we can protect future generations and educate them. Where do we go from here? I guess, I'm not asking you to solve all the world's problems, but what does it look like from your corner of, from your corner of New York City?
Well, there's a lot of diversity in New York City. There's like 15 languages spoken in the public school system in New York, I think it is. And Spanish and English aren't one of them, in addition to all of those languages. So there's a lot of diversity here. And I think exposing people, which is the obvious, and I think through stories, through telling children stories, and so that they're able to put themselves in the other guy's shoes. And it's the path to empathy if you understand somebody else's issues. Take it a simple thing like Cinderella, Cinderella. I love Cinderella, and I felt she was bullied by those mean sisters, and I used to think to myself that when I grew up and I saw one of those sisters, I was gonna punch him right in the nose. So I think I was feeling empathy, or I was feeling for Cinderella. I was gonna stand up for her and like that. So I think that that's one way to reach kids is to tell them stories about kids in other places, or look at the pictures in this book of the kids in other places and tell them stories about what's going on. In the photos, there's a nice photo here of kids in school, this one.
I love that one. Yeah.
Yes. And these kids are in school. There's actually more kids in this school than there are in a New York City school, believe it or not, classroom. And because there's like 32 kids in a New York City classroom often. But they all have different expressions. And if you look at this picture with your child and you say, do you think that kid forgot his homework? Do you think he wants to go to the bathroom? Do you think he's afraid of the teacher? Some kids are looking at the camera and some kids are not looking at the camera. And all of a sudden, your child will look at these kids and say, oh, I know just how that kid feels when the dog ate his homework. And that is kind of a path, I think.
You talked about that familiarity and seeing folks. I mean, I lived in New York for about 9 years in Brooklyn before I moved back here to Ohio. And folks asked me, you know, do you miss living there? I said, you know, I really enjoyed our time there. The biggest thing I miss is getting on the subway every morning and hearing 8 different languages. And that kind of, our culture right now has a way, and social media especially, has a way of really dividing us and sort of keeping us all in our own little bubbles. I almost feel like this book, you know, it's aimed at children, but there are lessons adults can take away from here. Do you see that as a possibility?
Well, I'm not going to argue with you if you see it, but it certainly is the Sesame Street lessons that I've learned over, you know, my 44 years on that show, that you do kind of work on 2 levels, that you do give subliminal messages, that I think that's what drew me to Sesame Street. Yes, it was about numbers and letters, but it was so much more. As I said, there were no people of color on television in those days, and it was giving, you know, it was making a statement. It was implying that people of different colors could live together in a neighborhood, and that these people lived in the United States. And it had very special meaning for me because born in the mainland, notice I didn't say United States, because Puerto Rico is part of the United States. So I don't say born in the U.S., because if I had been born in Puerto Rico, I would have been born in the U.S. But I was born on the mainland, and I watched so much television in 1950. Leave It to Beaver and Father Knows Best. I loved them, but I wondered where that world was that I was watching on television and who those people, you know, it was the suburbs. I didn't see the suburbs. I didn't know what that was. It was like a foreign, you know, really like, you know, looking into a different planet and not seeing myself or people like me. I wondered what I was going to contribute to a society that didn't see me. I used to wonder about the Native Americans when I watched Gunsmoke and all the cowboy shows, because they were always having conflict with Native Americans. And in my mind, I used to think, but where are those people now? where did they go? And, you know, you go to school and you wouldn't ask those questions because you kind of felt that it was taboo. You were supposed, it's like the elephant in the living room, you weren't supposed to bring it up. So I had a point in there somewhere, but I forgot what it was. But anyway, the 2 different levels. So I think that, showing the people that Sesame Street showed and continues to do so, exposes people to many things, and hopefully adults are watching too, and they're learning along with their children.
See, since you mentioned, Sesame Street is a global, multi-generational institution, of which you are a tremendous part of that. Do you answer to Maria when people say Maria on the streets?
All the time, all the time. Because the Maria character is so much like me, or it's exactly like me, or it's me better. They were really, the Sesame Street people were very interested in me being a real person. And I remembered myself watching television when I was a kid and not seeing anyone like me, and also wanting to represent. I was raised in a tumultuous environment where, in a household ruled by domestic violence. So I found comfort on television, and I always thought that some kid was watching Maria, who might be in the same situation, or some kid needing comfort, and to show some kids who needed to see the world as a reasonable place. And I wanted to be that person if I possibly could. So that's me, and that's Maria, and it's all kind of one person. I fixed the same toaster for 44 years, though, I have to say, as Maria.
You're always working on that toaster?
Working on that toaster. I wouldn't do that as Sonia. I think I'd buy another one. But.
Right. A lot of folks know you as Maria, but and many know that you're an Emmy Award-winning writer on the show. There's a formula in Sesame Street that is just, it seems elusive and magical to some extent. Talk a little bit about what you learned and how you grew as a writer and as an actor in being involved in that show. You
had to, after like 5 or 6 years of being on the show, I wanted to contribute more to it. And the power is in the writing. It's in back of the camera, not so much in front anymore. So I was very interested in writing. I had some questions about the Latino content. And when I brought up the questions, the producer said, "Why don't you write some of this stuff if you're so smart?" So I knew the characters. I knew Oscar the Grouch. I knew Big Bird. I just put the stories in the Latino content, and that's how I started writing. I knew you had to be sincere. You had to have a curriculum goal, which was a huge book with all the curriculum that we were trying to teach, and it had to be funny. So you had to have a punchline at the end of it, and that was kind of the formula. Also, there were other educational shows before Sesame Street, but they didn't have the production values of Sesame Street. Sesame Street was like Laughing. It was a magazine format. It was sophisticated. They spent a lot of money in the creation of all those films and the animation that went into it. So it was a huge production. They wanted to be like television, not like a children's show per se.
So let's talk about your background, your educational background. So you talked about growing up in Bronx. Did you aim to be an actress or a writer, or how did you land?
No, I never. No, I mean, kids only want to aspire to be what they see. I didn't see any actors, but I did. As I said, I love television so much, and I love comedy. I love Sid Caesar, and all of the other comedy shows. And I realize now that I had a sensibility about how to tell a good story, and that what got me into writing. But I had to get into college somehow, and I went from being an A student in the Bronx to a C student when I got accepted into the High School of Performing Arts, which is the Fame School, specialized high school, which I went there for drama just because a teacher said, I never heard of it. A teacher said, you should try out for the school. I said, okay. Well, what was expected of me was not very much in the Bronx. When I was competing with these middle-class kids, my grades just plummeted. I didn't know how I could be so smart in the Bronx and so dumb in Manhattan. I mean, that's really what it boiled down to, because these were middle-class kids that I was competing with. So when it was time to go to college, I had to get into some school that would accept me on an audition. So I got to college like kids who are good at sports get athletic scholarships, because I was determined to go to college, and society was on my side. Society wanted me to go to college. It was the opposite of today. It's more idealistic. That's how I got to college. I became a drama student, and I thought that I would spend my life in regional theater doing Shakespeare, because there was more of a chance of being a person of color and being cast in a Shakespearean play, because there were no other plays. There were no parts on TV that I saw, but I could be, Juliet at some point. I'm the nurse today, but I could be Juliet then.
Well, and I
so
think
that's That's how I got
you,
into the acting.
and you say that you just got there because of acting. I mean, that's you got there on your merits and on your work. But yeah, certainly,
Of course.
certainly
No,
a tremendous amount of work.
I'm being
One of
falsely modest. Can't you tell?
you do not need to be modest at all. You need not do that at all. One of our managers wrote a comment to us saying that she really wants to thank you not only for helping her learn English when she came, but also being for being the first Latina on TV that she saw and represented all the Latino little girls. So she wanted to say gracias for you for that. So, yeah.
Thank you very much. That's music to my ears. That's exactly what I want to hear. It's exactly what I set out to do.
Another one of our viewers was asking, obviously Sesame Street, one of the things that's amazing about it is that it was inclusive before inclusion was something we're talking about. And she asks if you have any plans or thoughts about writing a book similar to A World Together about disabilities, or what your experience has been in writing for people with disabilities.
Actually, I have signed a deal with Fred Rogers Productions, and we are creating a children's animated series. And in the series is a little boy who has crutches, and I have to be coy. I can't tell you the name of the series yet, or the character's name, or I can't tell you that. But and the reason I wanted to have that character was because when I was a kid, there was a kid who had polio and he had crutches, and he was the best mambo dancer in the neighborhood. I mean, girls would line up to dance with this kid, and I just remembered him, and I wanted to pay homage to him.
So from Sesame Street, from the workshop to Fred Rogers, you are going to all of our cultural institutions. That's incredible. So when can we expect that to come out?
Sometime next October is all I can say.
All right, that's all you can say for now. That's fine. That's fine. We're in the middle of Hispanic Heritage Month, and we're talking a little bit about language. In the book, talks a little bit about how we talk about things differently, but the feelings and emotions are all the same. Hispanic Heritage Month, some folks prefer Latinx as a way to describe their culture or their background. How do you talk about that and sort of your perspective on how language changes and how that changes the way we look at the world?
Actually, I have a wonderful quote. It's on my bulletin board. I'm going to entertain the fans while I get it. Hang on.
Yes. This is a good time for you to submit any of your questions if you have any that are coming in. Very few of us get welcomed into Ms. Manzano's house, I think.
This is interesting about language, and the person who said it was James Baldwin, and he said, and it struck me so much that I cut it out of the newspaper and put it on my wall. He said, "Negro speech is vivid largely because it is private. It is a kind of emotional shorthand or sleight of hand by means of which Negroes express not only their relationship to each other, but their judgment of the white world. And as the white world takes over this vocabulary without the faintest notion of what it really means, the vocabulary is forced to change." So that's it's saying a lot, but it's saying how vocabulary changes with each generation. An example I can give you is, "Who's your daddy?" in the sports world. Now, to me, that's like an insult. I mean, when I was growing up, if somebody said that to me, you'd feel like, what are you saying? But it's used, newscasters use it. It doesn't, it absolutely has a different meaning. So, so language is, language does change. When I was campaigning for Barack Obama and I went to the Southwest, I was told not to use Latinx or Latin. They wanted Hispanic. And that's because that part of the country was populated by Spaniards when it was not part of the United States. Whereas Latins are sort of, I always think of Caribbean Latin people as opposed to Southwest Latin people or South America. So it's all rich, it's all good. I don't really get into the conversations of what's correct.
And that's a great point, because if we have that understanding that language is fluid, that our experiences are real, that we don't need to worry about saying the wrong things necessarily. If I say the wrong thing to you, you can tell me, I can apologize, and we move on, and we're still friends.
Yeah, right. It's not. When I was on Sesame Street, and they in the beginning years, they really wanted me to be myself and be real. So I used to speak Spanish, and I used to speak Spanish that I learned in the Bronx. And it was a lot of Spanglish. You know, I'd say things like lonchar for lunch and rufo for rufo. I mean, they were just English words with a Spanish accent, and words that my mother used. And they would, you know, and some research person would come say, you know, she's not really using real Spanish words. And I'd say, how dare you say that? My mother speaks this way. Well, I didn't know that my mother was the Mrs. Malaprop of Spanish. But, you know, but it did make me realize that that Spanglish, that mixture of Spanish and English was part of the experience. And that it does change, and that you can't set it in cement.
That is one of the more vibrant and gorgeous parts of having cultures aside each other, mixed with each other, and it is something that I think too many people are wrapped up in, that sort of political correctness. What can I say? What can't I say? And I think that's a great example. One of our viewers had asked a little bit about your family. I know you're married and you have a daughter. Your daughter who had a brief stint acting on Sesame Street. Talk a little bit about your family at home.
My husband is retired, Richard Reagan, and he was he ran a wildlife foundation, and it was a terrific time. I met the most interesting people. I thought, boy, if you think show business people can be eccentric, the people in the wildlife community can also be quite exciting. And we had a lot of fun. And as you mentioned, my daughter played my daughter on Sesame Street when she was little, and then didn't enjoy it too much. And I remember she didn't. She once said to me, "Why do I have to make believe you're my mother if you really are my mother?" So she's more into the visual arts. And I have less and less relatives in Puerto Rico because my mother's was the last generation there, and I have some siblings in New York.
A number of people have chimed in saying that they also see Puerto Rico as paradise themselves, and they've been there. Do you see yourself performing on stage again at any time in the future?
Yeah, you know, I love to be on stage. I don't think anybody's going to be performing on stage anytime soon. The way things are in New York. Because actually, there was going to be a production of Free to Be You and Me at Town Hall that I was hoping to be a part of, and that, you know, just stopped. I satisfied my desire to be in front of people giving speeches, and even that has been curtailed because of COVID. So I may, or, you know, I was in love, lost in what I wore, where you could sit and read. Pretty easy. I like to do that.
Yeah. Since you mentioned COVID, and because those shared experiences, I think, bring us together, we have people watching from around the world, around the country. What has your experience been like being in New York City? And I preface that by saying that a lot of folks had asked me, and I still have lots of friends in the city, and my sister lives outside the city. Being here in Ohio is a very different experience for me to deal with COVID than it was for many of you in the city. What has your experience been like?
It's difficult. It's difficult to remember to wear the mask outside all the time. You just have to sort of train yourself to come in and wash your hands at all times. I haven't gone out to dinner. It just doesn't seem appealing to me when there's all of the rules that you have to follow. So I go to the museum a lot, and I haven't been able to go to the museum. Haven't been able to go to the cathedral or to go to church either. So, it's very hard. It's very hard. A lot of the stores are closed, and there's a lot of people in sad situations in the street that you might not see in a suburban area, but you see here more often because the social services aren't what they were before. There's overflowing trash cans in the city because the cleaning men can't get through because there's more parking available, because everything depends. It's like dominoes,
Right.
That people were not going to work, so the mayor thought, well, let's not make them move their cars. That's a hardship. Well, it is, but then the cleaning guys can't get through, which means the garbage is overflowed. So it's tough.
We went without a car for years and years, and then finally broke down and got one, and then spent hours driving around looking for parking every night. COVID is, I think, we really don't know how it is affecting us right now in the long term. As someone who's so attuned to the development of children, what kind of, if you were to speculate, how do you think this is affecting our kids right now?
I shudder to, well, here's an example. Sesame Street has this outreach program, and it's reaching children who live in Syrian refugee camps. And these kids have been born, and they're 4 years old. They've never seen anything else. They don't know that birds fly in the sky and fish swim in the ocean, because the refugee camp is all they've ever seen. So Sesame Street is there with some information for them. Some of the kids that will only know these last 4 years and the turmoil that they sense from their parents, and now wearing masks. So it's not a good experience for them. I can't imagine how they will learn social emotional skills with having their faces covered up, those who are able to go to school. I don't know what the answer is to that, how this is going to affect behavior.
Yeah, it's something that keeps me up at night, certainly, with kids in first grade now. And we're fortunate to be back at school because I'm privileged enough to be able to send them to a school.
Yeah.
But it's so I want to turn to a couple of questions from folks that are watching. You have accomplished a tremendous amount in your life. Anybody else could just kick back, put your feet up on the table. What do you still want to accomplish? Because I know that you're not done.
Well, I still want to write some more novels. I'm actually going to write 2 more for Scholastic. I'm slated to write some more young adult novels. I wrote Becoming Maria, Love and Chaos in the South Bronx, which is a memoir, and The Revolution of Evelyn Serrano, who's the coming of age story in 1969 when everything happened. Moon landing, love, Woodstock, and Sesame Street, and political awareness in the Latino community was a big year for that. So I hope to write more books. I'd like to write an adult book.
Mm-hmm. What would you write about?
I would write about love and chaos on Sesame Street.
I would read that. What was, let's about the chaos a little bit. What was one of the most challenging moments for you working on Sesame Street? You had many decades there. Certainly no shortage of challenges there. But what was one that stands out for you?
Well, one both challenging and exhilarating was when Will Lee, the actor who played Mr. Hooper, died, and we did the show on death. And it was such a stunning thing to do. The producer, Dulcie Singer, thought, why are we not going to tell our viewers what happened? Death is a part of life. There's no good guys or bad guys. It's, it just happens.
Mm-hmm.
And, she did a remarkable job. She, the research got on. We have a huge research department. They got on the case right away and found out what it was that children were afraid of, what their thoughts were about that. Most of them wanted to know who was going to do for them what this departed person could not do. Who was going to take them to school? Who was going to put the food on the table? Who was going to take care of them? That was their main thought. So we addressed that. And Big Bird says, who's going to make me birdseed Sundays without Mr. Hooper here? So that was kind of a challenging, because everybody was very upset. And we did the scene in one take. No one could do it again.
No, absolutely not. Everybody.
We did the scene in one take.
Not a dry eye.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. And I don't recall, and maybe when Maria exited Sesame Street and left Sesame Street, and one of our viewers said that she had sort of lost touch when her kids grew up. How did Sesame Street explain Maria leaving?
They didn't.
Really?
I just walked into the sunset. They didn't. That was just. But frankly, I wasn't on the show that much towards the end.
Sure.
There were more puppets on the show and less humans in general. And then I was not on the show that it was time to move on.
Let's talk a little bit about, I want to go back to that sort of division and divisiveness that I think I can read it in your face, and it's something that's on my mind a lot, and about how people really need to spend a little bit more time getting familiar with each other. What would be your advice to parents or folks who I guess helping our kids be open-minded at the same time when maybe their uncles or their aunts are coming to dinner and sharing sentiments that are completely counter to that?
Yeah. Well, our political leaders are sort of behaving in ways that you wouldn't want your kid to behave. They're so a lot. I know what you mean, where adults are not setting very good examples, and you're in the tough position of saying, well, it's like Oscar the Grouch. That's that's how he is. That doesn't mean that that's how you have to be. I think Oscar was, of course, a benign character, but we made a lot of points with his grouchiness, and he's so exasperating, but that's how he is. And we still cared about him. We still cared about this person who was contrary.
Yeah. I think that's a really good point too, and I think even here in our organization at the library, we talk a lot about saying we don't do that here, or that's not how we do things here. And when you come across somebody who maybe is speaking against the values of the organization or the values of your family, that's not how we do things here, and that might be the way Oscar does things. But
yes, but it's right. I remember I was watching I don't know, it was a documentary, and a woman was talking to a child, and she said, this is the way things are. I had nothing to do with that. We're not going to do it like that, like that, which gives the child the idea that he has a choice, that he doesn't, he has a choice to do what he or she thinks is right.
And so do the adults too, right? We are not static individuals. We are not formed in cement when we turn 18.
Right.
We can and should change.
Yeah, and that we shouldn't be afraid of anything that's different. I think that's the conundrum. When I read Sherman Alexie books, and I read about, the hard life he had on a reservation as a kid, and what we have in common is that we were both poor as children, but we have totally different experiences, and we're of different generations. But I'm really curious. I want to know more. It doesn't frighten me. It doesn't take anything away from me to know him or that. It leaves me completely intact, actually richer.
You come away richer. Yeah, exactly. This is not a zero-sum game that you cannot.
If I'm with this person, if I embrace this lifestyle, I'm less.
So you obviously broke plenty of ground on Sesame Street with your writing and just being on television. Did you experience, what kind of discrimination might you have experienced in your career, especially in your professional career?
I can't say that I really experienced any discrimination, other than when I first started Sesame Street. I'd go up for other parts, other jobs, and they always wanted me to have an accent. They wanted me to have an accent. I always had to play a cleaning lady or a woman of the night. And when I saw my peers, my white peers, going up and being young girls, because we were all young girls, I never went up for that part. So you always had to sort of, tie yourself in a knot to go up for these certain parts. And I think that, sometimes a call would be out for a Latina woman, and they would be 50-year-olds, 20-year-olds, 80-year-olds. I mean, we were all lumped together.
Right.
So that was that kind of indirect discrimination, that systemic kind of discrimination.
Sure.
So I stayed on Sesame Street.
Yeah, stay where it's safe, and you're
right,
and you can still grow, and you're still breaking barriers there. Yeah. Let's wrap up with a couple of fun questions.
Okay.
Do you have a favorite Sesame Street character?
Oscar the Grouch. I love him. I always say that I left the show because 44 years was long enough for me to wait for him to propose. Oh, I like him.
I love Oscar as well. My puppy is named Oscar. He's a family favorite. What about favorite song? Do you have a favorite song that you sang on Sesame Street?
What's the name of that song? What is my favorite? What's the name of that song? I think "Sing" is "Sing, Sing a Song" is of course a favorite song, because it's so simple that you always think, like, why didn't I think of that? It's such a terrific song. I'll tell you what was an exciting time was when I walked into the studio and Lena Horne was singing "It's Not Easy Being Green" with Kermit the Frog. I wasn't a writer at that time. I was thinking, are these people singing about what I think they're singing about? They certainly were. That's to talking about levels. I mean, that song is about race, but it's also about just acceptance and, not being happy with yourself. It's on so many levels, that song. That was a great moment.
I don't expect you to be too tuned into a lot of this right now, but what else is out there right now, do you think, that is comparable or even gets close to what Sesame Street was doing in its day, and it still continues to do for kids and families? Where are some of those positive examples?
I don't know. I don't know.
I don't want to. Yeah.
I don't know, but it's not because it's not out there. It's just because I just don't know. There's no little kids in my life, so I'm not tuning into what they're.
True. Fair. That's fair. Favorite special guest that you had on the show?
Stevie Wonder.
Stevie Wonder.
And Stevie Wonder came on and he did a Superstition, and it was, the whole studio was just rocking out. It was like old people, young people, black people, white people. Everybody was just on the same page. It was so exciting. Little kids were just, Tony Bennett. Tony Bennett, because Tony Bennett was famous when I was little. I mean, he's always been famous. And then I knew I was on the show a long time when this beautiful girl was playing. I walked in and there was this beautiful girl playing the piano. Oh, she just looked like Nefertiti. She was so beautiful and played so gorgeously. And she came up to me and she said, "Oh, you're Maria from Sesame Street. I just love Maria from Sesame Street." I said, "Oh, thank you very much." And when she turned her back, I asked my friend, "Who was that?" It was Alicia Keys. Now, I know, of course, now, but she was, you know, it was early in her career, and it was charming to meet her.
One of our viewers wants to know if you got to meet Linda Ronstadt when she was on as well.
I did meet her, Linda Ronstadt, and I also saw her at the latest Kennedy Center Awards, where she received an award along with Sesame Street. And she was quite a spitfire and said exactly what was on her mind. Yeah. She was a great talent.
It's a valuable lesson for all of us. Well, Sonia Manzano, I really want to thank you for your time with us tonight. It has been a pleasure. Thank you for inviting us into your home, and thanks for coming into our homes and our offices.
Thank you.
I do want to encourage folks who don't already have a copy of A World Together to pick up a copy, either at the library or at your independent bookseller or where have you. Thank you for joining us, and thanks to everybody here for joining us live. We hope that you'll join us for other authors events with Toledo Lucas County Public Library. Have a good evening, everyone. Thank you so much.
Have a good evening. Bye-bye, Jace.
Bye-bye.